Trump on the defensive over Syria. Old-fashioned discipline in schools.
If you show them the paddle, then, they know, oh, he does have one.
And the app that prescribes birth control. President Trump has removed his chief strategist, Steve Bannon, from the National Security Council. The council advises the president on U.S. security and foreign policy, and is usually filled with cabinet secretaries along with other senior military and intelligence officials. Bannon still retains the highest level security clearance. In front of a Senate committee today, Homeland Security Chief John Kelly insisted that physical barriers actually do work. But he also said the wall President Trump wants to build wouldn't cover the full 2,000-mile U.S.-Mexico border.
It's unlikely that we will build a wall or physical barrier from sea to shining sea.
In its first election since police shot and killed Michael Brown in 2014, the city of Ferguson declined to elect its first black mayor. James Knowles will retain his post. He defeated Ella Jones by 12% in a city that's almost 70% black. Knowles was in office when Brown died, and for the Black Lives Matter protests that followed. The Navy today temporarily grounded its entire fleet of T-45 jets, the main aircraft used in training Navy and Marine pilots. Instructors had refused to fly because the jet's oxygen systems kept malfunctioning. The Navy says dozens of engineers are working on the problem, and the T-45 should be flying again on Monday. Germany's government passed a plan today allowing it to fine social networks like Facebook up to $53 million if they don't quickly take down hate speech posts.
Für strafbare Hetze darf es in den sozialen Netzwerken genauso wenig Platz geben, wie das auf der Straße der Fall ist.
Media and rights groups say it could open the door to a crackdown on free speech. Harrowing images of Tuesday's chemical attack in northern Syria continue to surface. At least 70 people choked to death, and the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said that almost a third of those who died were children. Most of the hospitals in Syria's Idlib province have been destroyed by airstrikes, and doctors are scrambling to treat the hundreds of patients in urgent need of care. The Syrian army categorically denied that it used chemical weapons. Russia's defense ministry, the Assad regime's main military partner, went a step further and offered a counter-theory that conventional airstrikes hit a rebel weapons depot that then leaked poison gas. At the United Nations, American UN Ambassador Nikki Haley made an emotional appeal to Assad's backers in Moscow.
How many more children have to die before Russia cares?
She said if the UN doesn't respond, that individual states would be, quote, compelled to take our own action. But it didn't take long for the air to rush out of Haley's threat. At an early afternoon press conference at the White House, President Trump refused to offer any specifics about what the United States might do on its own.
The United States stands with our allies across the globe to condemn this horrific attack.
He again blamed President Obama for leaving him a mess and said that any new plans would be kept secret.
Militarily, I don't like to say where I'm going and what I'm doing.
But the truth is, the president doesn't have any options. He can't invade Syria without starting a massive new land war. He can't bomb the Assad regime out of power without huge civilian casualties. And he won't be able to dissuade Russia and Iran from supporting Assad, even if he embraced the kind of internationalist foreign policy that he ran against. So where does that leave the new president? Stuck, just like his predecessor.
Thank you.
On Wednesday morning, North Korea test-launched another ballistic missile into the Sea of Japan. The warning shot was meant to show that the DPRK is ready for a fight, and its intended audience was China and the United States, whose leaders will meet tomorrow at President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. Trump has said he expects President Xi Jinping to help rein in Pyongyang, threatening consequences on trade if China doesn't step up. But Trump hasn't done much to make that threat credible. Alexandra Jaffe explains.
This is how Donald Trump talked about China during the campaign.
China taking our jobs, taking our money. We can't continue to allow China to rape our country, and that's what they're doing.
Just last week, Trump tweeted a warning. The meeting next week with China will be a very difficult one in that we can no longer have massive trade deficits. That message was clear. President Xi better come to Mar-a-Lago ready to make concessions on trade, or else the U.S. will do something. But the things the Trump administration has done so far on trade aren't much. Trump promised to label China a currency manipulator on his first day in office. That hasn't happened. During the campaign, Trump also floated slapping a 45% tariff on Chinese imports to tackle the trade deficit. He hasn't made any moves in that direction either, because he can't. That would require congressional approval. Last week, he did sign 2 executive orders on trade, but even those didn't do much new. One ordered the Commerce Department and the U.S. Trade Representative, who, by the way, hasn't been confirmed by the Senate yet, to write a report on what caused the trade deficit. Dozens of those reports already exist. The other increased enforcement of laws that bar foreign companies from selling products in the U.S. at a lower price than what they charge at home. But after all the empty talk of cracking down on China, and then Trump signing 2 basically toothless executive orders last week on trade, what reason does China have to worry about the president?
Should we get the go-ahead?
The one promise Trump did fulfill on day 1 of his presidency was completely dropping the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement, which was meant to align China's neighbors with the U.S. instead of Beijing. Backing out of that agreement weakens America's bargaining position with China. The Mar-a-Lago meeting will be a good opportunity for photo ops that make it look like Trump and Xi are on the same page. But in reality, on North Korea and trade, the issues that matter, there's little incentive for them to actually get there.
I don't know if I want to show y'all. This might be on TV, but I would never want to intimidate students. But there again, if you show them the paddle, then, they know, oh, he does have one.
Principal Dustin Evans runs Bland High School in North Texas. His school district still allows corporal punishment. While in recent years he's relied less on paddling, he has seen it as an effective practice in the past. There are lawmakers in your state who right now are debating, different ways to regulate corporal punishment. What do you think of that?
I think it's going to be hard to find a policy that fits everybody, just a blanket policy. I think it should be up to the local school districts. You've got your rural schools, your suburban schools, your urban schools, and I think everything's different. The setting's different. Some parents want that, and some parents don't want that.
In the 22 states where in-school corporal punishment is legal in the U.S., regulation isn't uniform and can change from one district to the next. In Texas, it's outlawed in major cities like Dallas and Austin, but remains a popular practice in more than 40% of school districts. To appease parents and legislators who support a ban, in 2011, the Texas legislature required all school districts to give parents the ability to opt out, a compromise that hasn't worked out as planned in some communities, like DeSoto County, just outside of Dallas.
He dragged me out and then he put me on the wall. He made me face the wall.
Last year, when Elijah Smith was 5 years old, his kindergarten teacher paddled him with a wooden board for sticking his tongue out at another teacher. Elijah's mother had signed an opt-out form. How did you feel when it was over?
Bad. I feel bad. I got a little scared at night time.
You were scared?
At night time, because he paddled me. And I dreamed about when he had paddled me.
I was furious. I was upset. Still to this day, almost a year later, no explanation has been given to myself or my husband.
Striking a child, I don't believe that it should be a resort for a teacher at all.
His school, Meadows Elementary, like all schools in DeSoto County, distributes opt-out forms at the start of every school year. There's no requirement about how schools in the state present the form. Many parents don't even know it exists. 93% of parents in DeSoto County who return the form opt out. When you signed that opt-out form, what did you think that it represented?
Basically, you agree or you disagree. I purposely, for some reason, this particular time, my mom said put asterisk marks there. I put asterisk marks and circled it. because that's how much I disagree with it.
When Smith found out that Elijah had been spanked anyway, she reached out to local and national politicians and planned to sue the school and get the teacher fired. But an attorney at the municipal court discouraged the family from taking legal action. Even with an opt-out form in place, Texas educators have fairly strong immunity in corporal punishment cases, as long as there's no evidence of excessive force or negligence. Elijah didn't have bruises or signs of harm.
Because it's still part of state law, there's not a lot of recourse for parents, other than if it was not administered in the correct manner.
David Harris is the superintendent of Elijah's school district. Harris wouldn't say whether the teacher who paddled Elijah was disciplined. The teacher and the Meadows Elementary principal would not respond to repeated requests for comment.
Is an opt-out form essentially useless so long as Texas allows for corporal punishment at a state level?
It shouldn't be, but the answer is yes. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to say parents, they don't have rights, because they certainly do have rights. But the bottom line is, if it's going to happen, we want to make sure it's done correctly.
This year alone, 3 Texas House representatives have filed new bills to ban or closely regulate corporal punishment in schools. Representative Eddie Lucio is one of them. His bill, HB 166, would ban the practice outright.
There's no consistency, right? So corporal punishment in one school district may be a slap on the hand, right? In another school district, it may involve a paddle. It may involve several strikings. Maybe there's a disclosure in very fine print about opting out of corporal punishment, and it happens. What about that parent?
Wake up, sleepyhead.
So a child who has no real say is at the mercy of their parents and administrators. We're going to allow them to be struck physically.
After Elijah was paddled, Smith pulled him out of Meadows Elementary and had him homeschooled for 3 months. The district then transferred him to Northside Elementary, where Elijah says he feels safe. But the school is still in DeSoto District, which means that corporal punishment is still allowed. The Smiths filled out another opt-out form.
Is it strange to switch from one school to the next where technically the same thing could happen again?
Yes, but we don't feel safe. We just have to educate our kids and just sign a paper and hope that it doesn't happen again.
Getting a prescription for birth control generally requires a doctor's visit that can be stressful and embarrassing, especially for young women. Now, a new app called nurx cuts out the office trip entirely, which raises a new question. Is there such a thing as too accessible?
What's happening? Ellie's an 18-year-old high school senior in a Chicago suburb. For privacy, she didn't want to be identified by her full name. Ellie got birth control from her boarding school health center without her parents knowing. But when she transferred to the local high school, she didn't know how to get the pill and couldn't get her parents to support the effort.
So were you having unprotected sex?
Yeah, for a point of time. I mean, it's just like, sometimes it just ends up that way. Ever since I've come home from boarding school, I have not had birth control. I've had no way of getting it. I think I had like 2 leftover packages from Andover and was like spacing them out.
Rationing.
Yeah, it was so bad. I was like, this is not how it works. I'll take a pregnancy test every week. I'm like spending an unreal amount of money on Plan B.
Did you ever want to talk to your parents about it?
Yeah, I tried to so many times. I'm like desperately trying to reach out to, still now, like, please help me. Please, like, have this conversation with me or, like, advise me. Like, be my mom for a second. And it's just like, no, like, shut down every time.
What Ellie found was an app saying it could prescribe and deliver birth control, even send Plan B via Postmates, all without a visit to a doctor for the usually required conversation and pap smear, with or without insurance, and certainly without her parents knowing.
Am I gonna get like Tic Tacs in the mail? Like, is this like a real like qualified doctor talking to me? Although it was an app, it just felt so personal. Like, I was like, wow, I feel connected to someone who, like, feels me, like, understands what's happening here.
On the other end of the chat is Jessica Knox, a doctor and nurx's medical director, based 2,000 miles away in downtown San Francisco.
So essentially, the way it works for patients, they come to our website, they choose the medication that they want to use. So there's any selection of birth control pills, emergency contraception, also the patch and the ring. But if everything looks good, we can go ahead and write the prescription. It goes to one of our partner pharmacies.
So there's a potential that you could fill out the form on the app and never even chat with the doctor and still get a prescription.
I mean, sometimes that happens. So we, for a lot of the young, healthy women who have no other issues going on, all they'll hear from us is, hey, thanks for using nurx. We've sent your prescription to our partner pharmacy. Here's what you need to know about using your birth control.
A lot of men, they just don't understand that it would be stressful to get birth control.
They don't
or like
get it
that
at
the
all.
pharmacy relationship is stressful, or that going to the doctor's office would be stressful. Like,
yeah.
How old do you have to be to use nurx?
The age limitation depends on the state that you're in. So in California, girls as young as 12 years old can get a birth control prescription without their parents' consent.
When you actually have a bunch of teenagers ordering birth control through an app, it's going to be a little disturbing to people.
Yeah, it is. My optimistic self wants to say, like, oh, it'll normalize things. Like, maybe eventually it'll make it less stigmatic.
nurx has medical buy-in. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists told me they support lowering barriers to birth control. Hans Gankaskar, nurx's co-founder and CEO, wants to get people used to using an app as their doctor for a lot of things. Aren't there some benefits to seeing a doctor? I mean, if you're a 12-year-old going in to get the pill, wouldn't it be beneficial to physically talk to a doctor in the same room and have that conversation, that human conversation?
I call that kind of thing hostage care. Like, if you're saying, we're going to hold your birth control hostage because we want to do all this other stuff, like we want to do your pap smear, we want to sit down and talk to you. But if you lose a lot of those patients by requiring that and holding their birth control hostage, then you have to ask yourself, how important is the other stuff and how important is the birth control?
I'm not ready. I'm not done watching that.
Okay.
Ellie's been dating her boyfriend for the past year. They run the campus radio station together.
There's a lot of cats everywhere.
They are not pregnant.
Pepsi just released, half-heartedly defended, then deleted their latest ad. It's going to need a closer look. We open on a rooftop. Wait a second, rewind. Did you catch that clever bit of subliminal advertising? Anyway, the rooftop. A cellist plays, before moving downstairs because his passion for his craft needs to be contained within four walls for a bit. Below, a movement is stirring. People are marching and holding signs saying join the conversation and love, so you know this is a very specific cause they're marching for. A woman in a hijab sits in her studio and is drawing all over her photos. She is what they refer to as a mixed media artist. Meanwhile, Kendall Jenner is trying to pretend in the commercial, as in life, to be a high fashion model. But with the out-of-control protests happening right next to her, she's easily distracted from her work. The chaos of the crowd also disturbs the cellist, who must be doing pretty great as a cellist judging by all that floor space. And he grabs a masculine black can of Pepsi and walks out onto his balcony to witness the historic counterculture movement. Below, two women eat brunch, because if this ad proves anything, it's that protest is truly the new brunch. The Muslim photographer has a moment of frustration with all the photos she took the other day. Why bother with any of these when history is happening right outside her door? She runs downstairs, grabs her camera, and heads outside to document the horrific and bloody reality of this march. This is the harrowing story of a city where Pepsi, public assembly, and music have all been outlawed, the punishment for which is death. In an inspirational moment of public disobedience, two illegal dancers and the illegal guitarist and illegal cellist perform an illegal protest song in the streets. It's a heroic moment, but the unfortunate reality is that they'll soon be arrested and put to death. The cellist, now a fugitive, passes Kendall's government-sanctioned photo shoot. They identify each other as leaders of the resistance, and Kendall decides it's time to reveal her true identity as the undercover CEO of Pepsi. Pepsi CEO Kendall Jenner walks through the crowd, while out of frame, other brave protesters are being shot and killed for the cause. Kendall manages to evade the gunfire and finds a massive contraband stash of Pepsi with a street value of $15. She walks to the head of her movement as the Muslim spy shadows her through the crowd. CEO Kendall Jenner reaches the police line, a legal can of Pepsi in hand, and gives the evidence covered with her fingerprints to the police officer. The police officer takes a sip. Woke Kendall and the rest of the crowd erupt in cheers. They're hopeful the ruling class will finally understand that possession of a controlled Pepsi shouldn't be a crime punishable by death. The police officer turns to his colleague. They have all the evidence they need. The trial of Kendall Jenner will begin tomorrow. Drink Pepsi.
That's Vice News Tonight for Wednesday, April 5th.